Burton and I'm an aeromodeller and an engineer. Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. I've shown applying rib tapes before, but not at quarter scale. So what I'm actually using, and I was going to cut my own rib tapes, but according to my drawings, the TPI should be a lot higher than even these. These are the Mick Reeves quarter scale tapes, rib tapes, and this is an old batch, and it's cut out of Solatex, but I do have a new batch. The size is the same and everything else. It's just it's Oratex rather than Solatex. So I'm just going to show you how I'm going to treat. Sorry, there's a little bit of a fabric that was sticking up that annoyed me. I'm just going to show you how I'm basically laying this out. Now the way the full size is done is there is a rib tape that runs right down from the top of, I called it the spine or the leading edge of the rudder. So I'm going to do likewise, and that is, if you study the drawings, you'll see that that is the first piece of tape that seems to be applied. So that's going to be the first piece of tape I apply. Now, when you're doing this covering, you'll feel that the edge is quite sharp, and it'll lift if you really pick at it. So what I like to do is to iron it down and get the edges nicely down, and then I'll go over it with a coat of dope to seal the edges, and then I'll sand that, and then I'll put another coat of dope just on the edges of the tapes, and then sand that again, and then that's it. They're pretty well sealed then. And then when I put the primer on, I sand it again, and what you do is you take that rough edge away and just soften it into the to the surface. Let's just trim the end, wrap it round, and iron it flat. So the next piece to go on is a rib tape. This actually is a perimeter tape width, and this is a rib tape width. So the rib tape is slightly narrower, and that runs from the front of the rudder to the rear, right across the top like that. So I'm going to pin that down. Now I want to get it so that the serrations are just hanging over the edge. Make sure you get the edges down, and make sure you get it over these nice dimples that we put into the area where the top sort of shroud goes over the airframe. Now my subject aircraft has a small circular piece of fabric. It goes over this joint here, so we will do likewise. And in the Mick Reeves kit, or available from Mick Reeves, is in the same scale as these other tapes, the rib and border tape, perimeter tape. He also does a range of circles that are cut with in the same way. These are sometimes difficult to get and separate. There we go. And this is centered on that point there. So we just position it like that, and then stick it down with the iron. Now it's interesting, if you look at the photographs, there's actually no rib tapes over these. So if you were going to try and make those by putting rib tapes, putting something underneath there and then rib tapes, it wouldn't work. You have to do it kind of the way we've done it and put it under the covering. So to make that actually work, we need to just make a slot through there so that we can get the iron in to the edges. And there's that circle feature added there. Next to go on are these rib tapes. In fact, the next one to go on is this one down here, the diagonal one. It's worthwhile studying the photographs you've taken of your subject aircraft and zooming right in to make sure you actually get these layers of rib and pinked tapes correct, because they do go on in a specific sequence. And the idea is that the perimeter tape tends to seal the edges so that they don't lift with the prop wash and the airflow over the airframe. The front ones, these could lift through here, so I was a little surprised that they didn't go underneath this tape, but they don't. They go over the top, but what they do is they go right round the leading edge, right the way to the midpoint. So that's that one. Now, to do these 3 ribs here, well, in fact the 4th one can be done now. But these 3 in the middle are special, and you'll remember when I did the Oster, I explained to you how the rib tapes work, because underneath the rib tapes, and what the rib tapes are actually doing is sealing the stitches that go through the fabric, holding the fabric against the airframe so that the airflow doesn't lift the fabric. And you use a series of loops and knots. It's actually a seine knot that was traditionally used, and it's a sort of a running knot. You watch the Oster video and you'll see exactly how that works. So the rib tapes are to conceal and seal the stitching so that weather can't get in and the tape, the fabric isn't lifted where the stitching has occurred. Obviously it penetrates to the fabric, so it's not waterproof at that point. So the rib tapes reseal the fabric, making for a weatherproof and windproof bond. But where there's no stitching, then the tapes just go straight over, and what they do when stitching is not involved is they're there to increase the strength of the fabric over a seam or over an underlying bit of structure. So where the fabric's going around the corner here, it makes the fabric double thickness to help protect it. So that's all these are doing, these ones I've added so far. These are areas, especially along this edge, this is an area where the fabric could vibrate with the airflow and it would crack right along that edge there. So this is a sort of a doubling tape to make sure that does not happen. I didn't seal those down particularly well, or didn't do them at all. Quite possible. What we're going to do for these ribs with simulated stitching, what I'm going to do the simulated stitching with is I've got some fine line vinyl or PVC masking tape. Now watch the Oster video if you would, or the pinked tape video, and you'll see that what is laid down first is actually a stiff strip. It's like parcel tape, you know, that package, not parcel tape, like that packaging tape, you know, banding tape I think they call it. That goes down first as an anti-chafe sort of surface. And I'm simulating that with this this vinyl tape. You could probably get away with sellotape, probably work, but I wanted something just a little bit thicker than sellotape. Now, to simulate the stitching, because I'm not going to do real stitching, this is a strip of self-adhesive, and they're actually paper, and they've just been cut with a, well, with either a plotter cutter type thing, or they've been cut with a laser. I'm not sure which, but there is some slight staining on the paper underneath, so it could be laser. I know the rib tapes are done with laser. So what I've done is they're too wide, and you possibly can't see it in the picture, I don't know, but you can see that I've actually, where's the camera gone? Up there. I've actually run the scalpel down through the midpoint of one strip to give me half lengths, because the full length is too long in my opinion, so I've gone to half length. They should actually be thinner as well, but it's going to get a bit silly if I start trying to divide them into sections. So all I've done is run a scalpel through, and I'm going to do them half length. Now the full size aircraft has stitches every 2 inches. So at half scale it'd be 1 inch, and at quarter scale we'd be looking at ½ inch. So all I'm going to do is mark out the position of the rib tapes, the rib stitching at ½ inch intervals. And then using tweezers, I'll add these small, just like that. Now it's important to make them vertical and nice and straight and tidy, because on the full size the stitches, the people that were doing the stitches, and my dad and stepmother have both done stitching, and they're very methodical and very meticulous as to the stitching position and angles and everything else. They're not shoddy, and people take a pride in their work. So don't put them on crooked, because that's not how they would have been. Not on a, well, not in my opinion. Perhaps one that was straight out of the factory and they were making them wartime and their pressure was on to get them out quick. They might have rushed, but I can't really believe that they wouldn't still have had pride in their work and done these things straighter. So anyway, that's just my opinion. When you see photographs of how the invasion stripes were applied to the World War II aircraft that went over on the invasion back into Europe, you'll see that they were put on with, in some cases, brooms, and it was just, really was just daubed on there. So yes, they did do it in a hurry, and it wasn't terribly accurate, and there was no masking involved or anything like that. But that was not done by people working in the factory. That was just people out on the flight line doing a rush job. It still hurts me to apply invasion stripes in such a shoddy manner. I think if you turned up with a model that was done properly and accurately with shoddy little shoddy invasion stripes, everybody would go, "Ooh, that's not very well made," and they'd all turn their nose up. But actually it'd be correct. But correct or not, I can't do that. So I tend to avoid modelling aircraft that have features that I don't like. I suppose we're all pretty much the same. We only model the aeroplanes that we actually want to do. If you don't really like a subject, probably never get around to doing it. As you've gathered, I quite like the Chipmunk. Consequently, I've done a few. This is number 7, I think. You can see they're a bit fiddly, but they don't really take very long. Now the rib spacing is altered depending on the airstream of the aircraft. The speed of the aircraft has a bearing on the spacing. It also depends where the ribs and the taping is within the prop wash moving back. So the root of the wings and the fuselage and the tail surfaces usually are stitched and rib taped because of that airflow. Also, if you start the aircraft gets faster and faster, therefore there's more airflow over the whole airframe, then the tapes and the stitching is different. Sometimes if it's very high speed, then the stitches are every 1 inch and not 2 inches. Well, that seems to be what I found. Right, so that's got those done. So now what we need to do is to go over the top of this with the rib tape. Now, the rib tape I've got here is only a fraction wider than these reinforcing tapes with the stitches. So you've got to be a little bit careful that you get it very as centered as you can. And then I'm just going to actually iron it down between those stitches, or between those simulated stitches. I'm going to push the iron up against one side of the simulated stitch. So I only want one sharp edge. I don't want both. This is to try and give the effect that the stitch is narrower than it actually is. And then you do the edges. And what you're also trying to do is to get the iron to form a line right along the edge of the reinforcing tape, which is under the rib tape. Remember, this is reinforcing tape, the green stuff, then the white bits are the stitching, and then this is the actual pinked rib tape that I'm putting down now. I had my doubts about this polyester tissue working, but now that it's had a few coats of dope, it's really nice. It's really nice. I kind of have forgotten how much hard work they were, but they were. But come out nice and taut now. They were a bit rubbery at first. Yeah, this one's a little bit wider than those other two, which is handy for us because I wanted it to be just a little bit wider, but it does mean it's not uniform with the others. What that's about. And there we have that much done. Now, as you can see, I've already done the other side exactly the same way. So the next thing we need to do is add what's called the perimeter tape. Now, perimeter tape wraps right round the leading edge. Now this can be quite daunting as to how to fit this, because you've got a massive curve to go around here. So I'll just have to hope that we can do it, and I can show you how it works. You may end up with some very slight wrinkles in there, but don't worry about that too much, because when you come to apply the primer, fill a primer, you can sort of sand those edges down to make sure they're nice and neat. So the important thing to do is to get a good start, nice and centered. Okay, and make sure the end is anchored, because you're going to pull on it. Okay, what I'm going to do, as you can see, it's flat, but if you pull it tight, do you see how it's automatically gone down on the edges? And that's what you're doing. You pull it as much as you dare, and then you iron it at that, trying to hold all that tension that you've put into the material and making sure it's very central. It's very important that it's central, because if you're off to one side, then you've got more tape on one side than the other, and that tape is then wider, and it's got a lot more work to do to try and shrink and get hidden. And you keep going round, keep pulling it. And if you can go all the way, then all the better. You can see I have in fact managed to go. In fact, I'm going to cut it there. And then I'm just going to push down these edges just to make sure it doesn't slip and come undone. Put a couple of darts in just here. Now we need to try and get this to flatten down. Just treat each side one at a time. So I've shown you this before, but the trick is to roll the iron around the radius, increasing, bringing my arm up at the elbow as I go. And what that's doing is actually shrinking the solar text as it's rounding it down and putting it down. Now usually you can't quite get it to shrink completely, and you end up with little tiny wrinkles. But you'll see on this occasion we've got rid of all of the wrinkles. Which is exactly what you hope you can do, but can't always achieve. There's a few there, just little tiny ones, but in fact they've gone. And there we go. So I'll keep going right around. The radius is or the circumference. No, the perimeter. Stick to that. The perimeter is a shallower curve around here, so I think I should be all right getting that all down. Now I do believe there's a trim tab actually attached to the trailing edge of the rudder, which I've not done yet, so we'll have to think about that Make sure it doesn't get overlooked. Right, back to the top again, and we've got our quite difficult radius to get right. So I go to the point where it's maximum radius, and I lift my elbow gradually. You can see it's starting to shrink the fabric. Keep lifting the elbow slightly while still rolling around the radius, around the curve rather. And with a bit of luck, it'll shrink and you'll be able to flatten it down. I don't know whether Oratex is any better at this. I don't know whether Oratex shrinks more than Solatex. This is Solatex. I would think it probably is very similar. I think the underlying material is probably very similar and has probably similar shrinking characteristics. And there you see now we've got very, very few wrinkles. Not really worth talking about. And that goes right round the whole top of the rudder. It's all completely flat. It's actually easier to do it with an iron and Solatex than it is on the full size. Keep running it, keep lifting your elbow. Slow it down a little bit so it gets hotter, especially around this area here where it could do with it. And as your elbow comes fully to the top and the iron is flat to the surface, with any luck, all your wrinkles will have gone. And there we have 1 1/4 scale Chipmunk rudder. Now there is an inspection, these circular patches. There are inspection holes on the rudder of some subjects, so you've got to look very carefully at which specific model or which specific aircraft you're modelling as to whether it has any circular inspection patches. And what these are circles like this, varying sizes, and it's probably going to be one of the smaller ones again, and it would just be, quite often they're where the hinge is, around here, and what you do is you literally cut on the inside of the patch if you want it to get inside. You do whatever you need to do inside, and then you put another patch back over the top of it to seal it all off. You'll find them all over the airframe. But there are some there is one on each side of the rudder, and I think it's around this hinge point. If perhaps there's never been any work done in the rudder, then there won't be a patch. It's possible that the patch is only there after you've cut it and you've worked inside and then you want to seal it again. I'm not sure, but just check your subject, your specific aircraft that you're modelling, as to whether that patch is there or not, because it's very easy to add. Okay, there we go. Let's push on to the elevators and get those done. As you can see, I've finished the pinking tapes on the elevators and just push fitted them onto the tailplane to see how they look. If you've enjoyed the video, please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.